Today I'm at one of the communist tunnel complexes in southern Thailand. This one's in Songkhla province in Sadao district. It's about 70 kilometers or 1 hour from Hat Yai. There are other tunnel complexes in Narathiwat province and also Betong in Yala province. This one is called Khao Nam Khang, and if you please excuse my Thai pronunciation, but Khao means mountain, Nam Khang means dew, that's D-E-W, not J-E-W. So it's Dew Mountain Historical Tunnel. It's a really lovely area. It's quite difficult to find, which is the reason why the communists chose this place. I'd recommend using a GPS. I tried to get here several years ago without a GPS and got lost and just gave up eventually and went home. There's not really a car park, it's just a road, but there are so few people here that parking's not a problem. Occasionally some big tour buses might turn up with a lot of people, but the guide was telling me that most days there aren't many people at all. I'll explain more later in the video, but the Malayan Communist Party started, I believe, in 1930. The sort of start of the Chinese Revolution was 1927, and there are a lot of Chinese in Malaya. So there were people who wanted a communist-style government. And then after World War II, two things happened. You know, people wanted to get independence from Malaya. They were fed up with British colonialism. They wanted that, and also to move to communism. And an official sort of communist insurgency began in 1948. That went on until 1960. Malaysia got its independence in 1957, I think, so there was sort of no need for continuing insurgency. So it stopped in 1960. However, there was a second insurgency in 1968 that ran all the way to 1989. And the peace agreement for that second part was actually signed in Hat Yai in the Lee Gardens Hotel. So this is one of the tunnel complexes that the communists used to sort of, you know, remain secret. And they base themselves in southern Thailand. You know, it's very near to Malaya, Malaysia, and the border has always been very porous, so it was a convenient place for them. So as I said, I'll explain more as we get more into the video. After you've watched the introductory movie, you come out into a museum area. And with most of my previous videos, they are of places that I've been to before, so I know roughly what I'm going to say. I've never been here before, so this is just as new to me as it is to you. So I might stumble a bit as I'm trying to explain things. There are lots of photographs on the wall, ammunition and shells, explosive devices, some clothing, transistor radios, caps. Oh, these spikes look pretty nasty. I guess I just put these in the jungle for people to step on. Irons to iron clothes, books, more guns and shells, ammunition. More bullets here. And this sign says Krung Mu Pa Tat. Krung Mu is hand tools, hand instruments, and Pa Tat is operation. So obviously when the soldiers, the communist sort of insurgents got injured, they were trying to treat them here as well. And if they needed an operation, they operated. So they're very sort of crude instruments, and I guess that conditions weren't very hygienic, and I'm not sure if they had access to anaesthetics, so not very pleasant if you got injured. Some uniforms, I don't know if these are originals or copies. This looks like maybe a generator, and these cans are probably for storing fuel. There's some communist flags, a wheelchair, a crossbow over the back. There are individual photos of the communist insurgents who were based here, and a couple of things surprised me. One was the number of women, and the guide working here told me there were more women than men. And the other thing that surprised me was their age. One girl, I think it was this one here, was only 12, and there are a lot, sort of 14, 16, very young. And he was quite an interesting guy as well. He works on the front desk, takes the money and gives tourists their tickets. And I asked him where he was from, and he told me he was a member of the Sagai tribe. They're a tribe of dark-skinned, curly-haired pygmies that lived in the forests of southern Thailand. And when I was working at the university, one of my students did her master's degree thesis on that tribe, went to live with them into the forest, sort of study how they live. He tells me that there's very few left in the forest now, that most have come into the cities and towns and are living sort of, in normal society. But there still are a few living in the forest, living in that sort of traditional way of life. Very interesting. Just here is a sort of memorial to all the people who died in the conflict. Each one of these with a name on, if the name was known. Bo Pla fish pond. This is now a fish pond. There's quite a lot of koi carp in there. But the guy told me that when the insurgency was ongoing, this is where they bathed. So the lower, sort of lower bathing area was for men, and there's one up higher for women, and it's where they also did their laundry. So water comes from the top of the mountain down to here. Now as we go on, there's an entrance to the cave here, and there's a flight of steps going up the mountain, and what he's told me is that I can either go in here and that will take me up to the mountain, then I can come down the steps, or I can go up the steps and then that will bring me down into the cave. So I think I'm going to do the latter and walk up the steps. There's 108 steps, and although my health and general level of fitness isn't what it was, I'm now 62, I should be able to manage 108 steps. Quite steep. The drive here was quite interesting. The roads are nicely tarmacked. There's some really tight bends and some very steep inclines. I think these are the biggest ants I've ever seen in my life. These things are absolutely huge. And very thoughtfully, they've made a little seat here at the halfway stage for old people like myself to sit down and take a rest. It's a really beautiful part of Thailand. It's right in the jungle, incredibly quiet and peaceful. I'm the only tourist here today. The guy tells me that some days there's a few people, some days the bus tours arrive and there's a lot of people, so he never quite knows what's going to happen. It's open every day from 7 in the morning until 5 in the evening. I think this is the kitchen area. Over here there are some large woks, and over here a manually operated rice mill, and what looks to be like a kitchen counter and some big chopping blocks. Obviously the reason for choosing this location is so that they wouldn't be found, and when cooking and using fire that will create smoke, and the smoke will give away their location. So they've devised some sort of mechanism to conceal and filter the smoke. I wasn't sure when I paid my money for the ticket whether there would be a guide or whether it would be self-guided. It's the latter. I'm just on my own, but there are signs telling you where to go in Thai, English and Chinese. Dern tam, looks on, follow the arrow. Like any organisation, military or otherwise, it would have been necessary to have meetings, and this is where they had them, in the conference hall. I'm not sure how much of this is original and how much has been rebuilt. Oh, and there's some Marx and other communists, Stalin, Mao up here, all the communist heroes. No English here, but you can probably guess from the Red Cross sign, and the Thai says Hong Payaban, so this is the medical room. There's a lady here dressed in a nurse's uniform and some very basic hospital beds and an intravenous drip. So not the greatest place to be if you don't feel well or you've been injured. And here are some actual photos. I don't know if they had mosquito netting back in the day, but being right in the jungle, there are lots of mosquitoes. It's very hot, very humid, and if you were sick, this must have been an awful place to have been treated. They've put up a sign here to show you where things are. So the kitchen and clinic we've seen already, 2 restrooms, the conference room we've seen, and there's actually a wedding room. I said previously that there were more women here than men, so I guess a few fell in love and decided to get married. So there's a wedding room, and this apparently is the way to the tunnel. This is quite a fascinating place. I've known about it ever since I arrived in Thailand, and it's been my intention to visit at some stage. For a long time I didn't have a car, and then before I was married I was seeing a girl that had a car, and she let me have her car during the daytime while she was working. And I tried to find this place one day, and what you find is that there are signs on the main road, but then the signs just dry up, and I just got lost. This was before the days of GPS, so I never got there on that occasion, and it's not something that my kids or wife are particularly interested in. So I just decided to come today, and so far it's been really good. Be careful, slippery. I'm still following the arrows, trying to find my way into the tunnel. This guy is on sentry duty just to make sure there are no unwanted or unexpected visitors. And the sign over here tells me that the tunnel is this way. Right, just going into a little bit of history. And I'm interested in history. I'm not obsessive about it. I don't study it all the time. And this area has a huge amount of history. The problem is trying to remember everything. So I might get a few things wrong, but I'll try. So it probably starts at the beginning of the 16th century when the Portuguese sent ships out to the Far East to find spices. Europeans, they got a taste for pepper and other spices which won't grow in Europe, and so there was a big spice trade. There's a bird, probably a swallow, flying around in here, and you can probably hear the echo as well. So the Portuguese were followed by the Dutch and then the British. and they established trading posts. The British had a big post in Surat in India, and in Thailand they were in Ayutthaya and Pattani. The Dutch seemed to favour Indonesia, Java, and the Portuguese, I think, established a little post in Malacca in Malaysia. And then there were various treaties. There was a Dutch-English treaty, and eventually sort of Malaysia and Singapore was colonised by the British, and the French colonised Indochina, as Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam. Well, the British also had Burma. Thailand was never actually colonised, but there are a lot of unequal treaties, and Thailand ended up ceding a lot of land to France and Britain. They weren't very happy about that. And also for a while there was a Japanese occupation of Thailand. The Thais aligned themselves with the Axis powers during World War II, and enabled the Japanese to land on southern Thai beaches. Then they worked their way down into Malaysia and Singapore, and the loss of Singapore to the British was a massive tragedy. Thailand declared war on Britain, but when the instruction went to the Thai ambassador in Washington, he didn't hand it over, so Thailand didn't officially declare war on the United States. And there's another little medical room here, just underground. So when the war finished, the British were furious with Thailand because they'd assisted the Japanese and they'd lost Singapore, and the British wanted reparations in rice from the Thais. And the Americans didn't punish Thailand at all. One was because Thailand didn't officially declare war, and also because Thailand was strategic in the American fight against communism that followed the Second World War. We've got another little cooking area here. Salt, rice and sugar. World War I didn't seem to affect the sort of colonisation business in Southeast Asia. It stayed basically the same. But World War II was different. That really did signal the end of that sort of period of imperialism. And the countries in Southeast Asia knew that and then started to fight for their independence. So Thailand had ceded a lot of land to France in what is now Cambodia and Laos. And when France fell to Germany in 1940, France was very weak. So the Thais decided they would try and get that land back. So they started the war with France. And that because there was sort of a Japanese occupation, the Japanese decided that they could have that land back. And it was the same in northern Malaya. There was a previous treaty, the 1909 treaty, that ceded land from Thailand into northern Malaysia. And during World War II, that went back to Thailand as sort of a gift to the Thais from the Japanese. But then when World War II ended, it reverted. So the land that the Thais had taken back went back to France and Britain. Here's a little telegram station here, so they obviously had communications as well. So after World War II, Malaysia was still a possession of Britain, and that didn't really please Malaya. So sort of two things happened. Oh, this flight of steps looks really steep. Be careful here. there was a movement to get independence for Malaysia, and also there was a communist party that had sprung up. I think the Chinese Communist Party began in 1927, and I think the Malaysian one was in 1930. So it was sort of two-pronged. It was to get independence from Britain, and also to establish a communist government. So, and the actual insurgency began after the war. I'm really having to watch my step here. This is very, very steep. Can you imagine building this? My God, it must have taken a lot of work. So the insurgency started in 1948 and ended in 1960. And this is where I sort of have a personal interest, because when Britain sort of won the World War II, they had lots of problems with their colonial possessions, and they needed lots of soldiers to sort of go and protect these places. So there was a system of conscription, national service, up until 1960, and my dad was called up. So he worked, or he not worked, but he was sent to the Middle East at first, and then ended up in Malaya for the Malayan Emergency. It was called an emergency, not a war, for insurance purposes. If it was a war or a civil war, the insurance companies wouldn't pay out, but being an emergency, they would. So that's sort of, I've got a genuine interest in history, but also a sort of personal interest because of my dad's involvement. And he died in March, and I brought back a lot of photos with me and uncovered quite a lot of photos of him in Malaya during the national service. That's another reason for wanting to visit this place. Okay, so this is right, we've come out where I showed you earlier. Here's the entrance to the tunnel, and here's the entrance to the steps going upstairs. This is a really nice place. It's set in the sort of jungle area near the Malaysian border. It's very peaceful, very quiet. They've got permanent staff here doing maintenance. So this guy's cleaning everything with a pressure washer. It's all very nicely kept, and it makes a very pleasant excursion out of Hat Yai. I just don't know why it's taken me so long to get here, but I fixed that problem today, finally. I went into this room earlier when I was looking at the memorial. I wasn't sure what it was. Outside there's a sign, Pipitapan Rak Mai, which means a root museum, as in tree roots. So they've got lots of roots here. Some have just come out the ground as they were, and some have been carved. Chinese signs, which I can't read. I'm limited to English and Thai, unfortunately. Pipitapan, which is museum, and then Rak Mai, which is a route. If you got this far, thank you for watching. Your support is very much appreciated, and more videos soon.